Peter Panagore is with us. His book is Heaven is Beautiful, How Dying Taught Me That Death Was Just the Beginning. So you succumb to hypothermia on this mountain. You have this absolutely mind-blowing experience that cannot be described with language. You make the decision to come back to your body to spare your parents the pain of losing you. They'd already lost their daughter. When you come to, what happens? What is your climbing partner still alive?
He is. As I came back to my body, I was being carried by this same angelic being, but I was being reduced in size and made into matter. And as I approached my body, as it carried me to my body, I could see my body dangling on the edge of the cliff, strapped in, arms splayed downward, and my partner, Tim, was shaking my body, screaming, "Don't die, don't die, don't die." And then this angelic being pierced my human chest and pushed me inside, and pushed me inside. And then I could see back into heaven, and then this eye in my heart closed, and my brain came back online. I could feel it booting up, and as it booted up, all of my pain came back to me, and I could hear Tim as I began to understand language, and I opened my eyes, and his face was near mine, and he had me by the coat. "Don't die, don't die." And he was screaming and crying, and my eyes opened, and he was shocked, and he said, "You were dead. I thought you were dead. I thought you were dead. If you were going to die, I was going to die." And he helped me stand back up, and I didn't have any idea where I was or who I was or what he was or what had happened to me or how I had changed. But I knew that I wasn't the same person anymore.
So how did you manage to get down off the face of the mountain?
Well, I think it depends on your point of view. It could have been a miracle because I've been trying to get that rope free all night. On the next pull, the rope came free. Or it could have been that I fell so far off the edge of the cliff that the rope released itself above. I don't really know. And we descended, and we went to the car, got out our tent, and we self-treated for hypothermia. We waited for our bodies to get warm enough to climb into the car to turn on the heater. And that's what we did.
And what's the conversation like now between you and Tim? Is he asking you about what happened? Are you relaying any information to him?
No, I'm not speaking at all. And everything we did say, it was all still survival. We were still in serious trouble. Just because we were in our tent, Tim had a tent with a chimney and a vent. It was an Arctic Circle tent. So we could fire up our stoves inside. We talked about firing up our stoves and sipping warm water, not hot water, and got into our sleeping bags. No conversation at all about what happened. We were exhausted. And Tim was an atheist. And I didn't know what had happened to me. And I didn't even know who I was anymore. So I began my life of silence. I said nothing to him. And we drove all the way back to Bozeman. At halfway there, we totaled the car, hit a semi. Tim took the remaining money we had in a bus to bring our skis back to Bozeman, and I hitchhiked, and I caused the car crash. And so not only
caused it. How did you cause the car crash?
Because several things happened that night on the drive home, one of which was that only Tim could drive his brand new car that his dad had given him. And at one point in the night, we were in the wrong lane, and we barely missed a head-on with a car. I screamed and yelled at him, and then we got arrested for speeding through a town. We got locked up till we paid our fine. And then, once that happened, I went back to sleep again, and I was so confused. And I woke up, and I saw headlights coming toward us. And I said, "Tim, there's a car coming." "No, there's not." "Yes, there is. You're in the wrong lane again." And I jerked the wheel. I grabbed that wheel and I jerked us to the right, and we swept to the right into the gravel, and there was a ditch. And before we got to the ditch, we get to the edge of the ditch, Tim yanked the wheel to the left, and he was screaming and I was screaming, and all sorts of things were flying in the car, and it felt like wheels had lifted off the ground on one side and then the other side, and we were bouncing, and cassette tapes and everything slowed down. And then I saw a movie of my life. And I saw the headlights of this semi-trailer truck 6 inches from the front of our car, right square onto it. And Tim jerked the wheel to the right again, and we shot away from the front of the semi, and we bounced back in under the semi into the wheels at the back of the flatbed and destroyed the car. And the truck driver was leaning on his horn, and there was all this screeching of tires, and Tim's braking, and neither of us got hurt. We got whiplash. I got a cut. The car was destroyed. And Tim was super angry at me.
You survived 3 near deaths in the matter, 48 hours?
It was a bad time. Hard time.
So a materialist would say that what you experienced on that mountain was an oxygen deprived brain, in the throes of death. What do you say to the materialists?
You didn't go where I went. And I'm not asking you to believe me. Actually, I don't even care if you believe me. It doesn't matter to me at all. The only fear I had, the only reason why I kept it to myself, I didn't want to be accused of insanity. I knew that it was real. It was so real in comparison to here that my whole life reoriented. I have atheist friends. Tim's not among them. I never saw him again. But my atheist friends, they love me for who I am, and because I don't need them to believe me, I'm not a zealot or an evangelist. I know who I am and where I'm from. I know I'm thought of as a fool by some, but I don't care. I know when I die where I go and who I am, and I'm not alone. There are tens of millions of us. Right now, I'm in a hotel room in Washington, D.C., looking at the Washington Monument and the lights of the city at the International Association for Near-Death Studies annual conference, where I gave a couple of workshops, ran a panel. There's many of us in this very building. Not one of us is a believer. Every single one of us has a level of conviction, a level of knowledge that none of us care what the materialists say, and none of us are trying to convince them. But the scientists here, they're collecting evidence for 41 years. A consortium of universities and professors have been researching near-death experience. Their conclusion, they're not sure how it works, but they think it's real. They don't believe it's real. They think it's real. If you get in a court of law, if you have an accumulation of evidence, you can make a conviction on an accumulation of evidence, circumstantial evidence, even if you don't have the murder weapon. They don't have the murder weapon, but we all say the same thing. There's this guy named Jeffrey Mishlove here. He won this huge award, $500,000 last year, from the Bigelow Foundation for Consciousness Study. The guy who owns Skinwalker Skinwalker Ranch?
Yes. Robert Bigelow.
So this
yes.
guy, he sold it, and he took all his money, and he established this foundation after his wife died. And he gave $1 million away last year to these research scientists. Jeffrey Mishlove, he won $500,000 prize on a white paper. And in this paper, he measured that 70% of all near-death experiencers commonly, regularly use 2 words. It doesn't matter if they speak Farsi or they're from Nairobi. Every one of us, light and love. And how does that happen to an atheist? Atheists have these experiences. And Jews and Muslims and Sikhs and Zoroastrians and materialists, it doesn't matter. I can't prove it. I can't prove it. And maybe someday science will prove it, and I hope that it does, because it's the only thing that's going to give humanity an opportunity to survive as a unified species. We know we're not alone in the universe anymore. Pay attention to the news. You know that. There's no evidence that we can put our hand on yet. But we're not alone in the universe. But we are one planet. And the way that we've lived, we've used politics and economics and religion, and none of them have worked well. But this, if we can see the light inside of every single person, if we can convince the materialists through scientific research, measuring in the brain, maybe we have a chance.
How do you go back to, or can you go back to a regular, what I call a workaday reality after experiencing what you experienced, knowing now what you know? How do you fit in again?
That is a really good question, Richard, because I came back non-attached to the world, to the people I love, to everything here. And but a fella's got to eat. So I kept a mask on for 20 years. I didn't tell anybody. I told my wife the day after we were married. I told one person, my best friend from my childhood. I didn't tell anybody else, because I knew that it sounded insane. But me, inside myself, I didn't care about anything anymore. I loved nature. I was going to go into the family architecture business. We had fantasies of skyscrapers in Boston. I did anyway. But I needed to earn a living, and I needed to eat, and I needed to find a way that I could pursue this oneness that I experienced, because that's all that I wanted. And so I went to divinity school, and I studied mysticism, and the dean who gave me this independent study for 3 years talked me into becoming a minister, and so I hid in the public eye. And I practiced my Kriya Yoga and my centering prayer, and I continued my studies deep into the Nag Hammadi text, the Dead Sea Scrolls, and as deep as I could go into the mystical literature to study and learn how to reintegrate. And that's really was the question for me. How do I live in the world? And what I found was I was never going to succeed living in the world. I could succeed integrating into the world only if I returned deeper and deeper into the divine inside myself. And so I went in this pursuit, this counterintuitive pursuit, because this is what all the oneness teachers have been teaching around the world for centuries, thousands of years. It's why the Yoga Sutras are still in print since 400 BCE, because the practices of breath and mental focus open the inner eye. And I found that by opening my inner eye, that I backfooted myself into heaven. And with my weight on my back foot, I found that I could live in the world through heaven inside me. Otherwise, I need money to live. I could have made a lot of money, but I really didn't care. I know that this life that I'm living, this Peter life, this is just one of 1,000 lives. And none of those lives were me. My orientation is toward the dissolution of my sense of self and the immersion, return to the field of photons inside. But to live in the world, I became a minister. And I got married. In my research, I found that there'd always been people like me in the history of the world. There'd always been near-death experiences. I didn't have a name for it. But I found that there had always been mystics everywhere all over the world. And some of them, Rumi is famous. He was a businessman. Meister Eckhart was a priest. I could go into a monastic setting, or I could live in the world.
It sounds like a very difficult life. I mean, I would imagine that maybe one of the misconceptions about people that have an NDE is that when they come back, everything is sweetness and light and love and joy but it sounds like it's a very, very difficult life.
People say to me, "Oh, I wish I had an NDE," and I say, I don't recommend it. The disassociation from the world, when I say it's radical, it doesn't. The world to me, I'm looking out at the lights of the highway in the city right now, and to me, it's beautiful lights, but it's as thin as a piece of paper, and it's as sturdy as that, and it's as temporary as that, and it's and to live in this place of suffering, I had no suffering, wholeness and wellness and healing. It's not like my suffering ended. You know, when you cut yourself in your arm and the doc stitches it up, it's all healed together, but there's a scar there. I had no scar in heaven. There was no suffering left in me, not a scar left in this world of suffering. I came back with this. People talk about being an empath. I had to stop going to music concerts because I would lose my own knowledge of myself in the crowd, everybody's emotion. I couldn't tell where I ended and they began. And I isolated myself, and that's one way I dealt with it. I live in a rural state at the end of a peninsula, at the end of a neck. And I am fed by nature, but I live on the edge of the wild. Because
is it difficult? Go ahead. You live on the edge of the wild.
That's all right.
Yeah.
In the wild, I get fed because not only is it thin as paper, it's illuminated. And the deeper I go inside myself, the more light pours through this place. I eat light. I'm a light eater. It feeds me. And the more I have, the better off I am here, even in the suffering.
Peter, we'll take another time out as we approach the bottom of the hour. We'll open up the phone lines, take your questions and comments for Peter Panagore right here on Coast to Coast AM. Welcome back. Just a reminder, coming up on Coast to Coast AM tonight, Sunday night, with George Norrie. In the first half, physicist, systems architect, designer, developer Adam Apollo has founded several education and technology-oriented companies and organizations. Since awakening at 15 years old, Adam dedicated himself to extensive studies in symbolic geometry, past life recall, martial arts, energy therapies, and occult magic. He'll join George to discuss how our history and archaeological stories of the dynastic periods of Egypt are missing vital observations and data. In the second half, Katie Beecher, a licensed professional counselor and medical and emotional intuitive with over 30 years of experience. She'll share how to connect with intuition to discover which areas of the body and spirit need healing, as well as how to identify and conquer malevolent spirits and entities and have a spiritual awakening. That's Coast to Coast AM, Sunday night with George Norrie. Back to more of my conversation with Peter Panagore and your calls on near-death experiences when Coast to Coast returns. And we're back with Peter Panagore. Peter, ever for a moment regret having that NDE? Do you ever sometimes wish it never happened and you could just continue to kind of skate across the surface of our reality?
Yeah, plenty of times. But I can't escape it. It's not like it just happened 40 years ago to me. It's happening to me now. And this readjustment that we were talking about, this integration, it would have been easier not to have, just to live in the illusion. But
does it make it? Sorry, go ahead.
No, that's fine. But the butt can hang there because I can't change it. It is what it is.
Do you find in talking with other, what do we call them, NDE survivors?
I like to call them death experiencers.
Death experiencers.
Theonauts, people who've traveled into the other realms and come back again.
Do many of them have trouble holding jobs and sustaining relationships?
Divorces, high level of divorces. Oh yeah. Holding jobs, yeah, some people do. It's easy to get lost here. In the old days, when everybody was alone, it was a struggle by yourself. But nowadays, there's a lot of help. We're all helping each other, integrating, readjusting, beginning to understand yourself, trying to think through what happened, and all that's making it a little bit easier to live here.
Let's go to the phones. Let's go to the phones. Caleb is in Chicago. Caleb, good morning. Welcome to Coast.
Hey, how are you doing, Richard? Thank you for taking my call.
My pleasure.
I really appreciate the way you host the show also. I like you're engaged, good questions. Anyway,
thank you.
I wanted to ask what the main reason that the guest and his friend don't talk anymore. I mean, you all went through like a traumatic event together. I would think there'd be a little room for some leniency on that regard, and maybe insurance to fix the car and everything. Can you maybe go into a little more detail about the falling out with that?
Great question. Peter, what happened to Tim?
Well, the last time we saw each other was on the steps of this cooperative I was living in when we exchanged skis and gear. And he said to me that his dad was so angry that his dad advised him to step aside from me. I understood. We shook hands and we parted as men who had experienced survival together. I trusted him with my life, and he trusted me with his, and that is never going away. But he had family dynamics, and I left for the next 12 weeks. Within a week, I was gone on a national theater tour. And by the end of that semester, he went back home, and I went back home, and I never saw him again. And back before we all had mobile phones and carried all our contacts, I had this little tiny book, 2 inches by 3 inches, in which I wrote everybody's name and their phone number, but I never wrote down his last name. I still have the book. And I've tried to find him. I wrote a Dear Tim letter in my book. My publisher said, let's not waste that page, Peter. And print cost us money. And if Tim reads the book, he's going to know it's you anyway. We tried to find him, but I never saw him again. And I'm still hoping that he finds the book and reads it. And I actually wanted to find him to hear what he had to say about that night. The publisher did spend money to try to help me find him. But we couldn't. University, the Park Service over there in Canada, we had no leads.
Jeremy is in North Dakota. Jeremy on the wildcard line. Welcome to Coast.
Hello, Richard. I'd like to tell you about my near-death experience.
All right. When did this happen?
On December 8, 2003, 19 years, 8 months, and 26 days ago, I was driving my Kia Rio up an icy hill. A Ford pickup started to slide down the hill at me. The Ford slid clear across my lane, hit my Kia Rio in my shoulder at about 25 miles an hour. The airbag and the seatbelt to my Kia Rio did not work at all. Immediately, I was in a coma for 2.5 months. While I was in my coma, just before I woke up, I was under the impression that my wife, now ex-wife, and I were walking up this giant mountain pathway that was a cliff. And as we were nearing the top, the mountain started to shake and a bunch of boulders started falling. I escorted my wife into a crevice on the side of the mountain, and just as I got her inside, I was hit in the head by a falling boulder and knocked off the cliff. And as I was falling to the ground, I heard a voice from the sky that said, "Jeremy, your tasks are not done yet." And just as I thought I was hitting the ground, I woke up in a jolt in my hospital bed in a castor oil.
2.5 months you were unconscious.
Yep.
So what happened when you? I mean, was everything okay with you and your wife afterwards?
She went out and had an affair, thinking that the man she married died in the accident.
She didn't think you were going to pull through, so she got on with her life, I guess.
Yep.
I'm sorry. How are you now?
I'm slowly getting better. I still have a little problem with my walking balance, but I have a impression that I'm supposed to live for quite a long time, because when I was in my coma, my doctor's best projections that they gave me and gave my ex-wife at the time was that I had in their best projections, I had a truncated lifespan of only 32, and I'd be a human vegetable the rest of my life. And I just turned 48, and I am definitely not a human vegetable.
Well, you're out to prove them wrong. Did you have anything you'd like to ask Peter Panagore? Or Peter, would you like to ask Jeremy anything?
Yeah. Hey, Jeremy, do you have any connection to other near-death experiencers, or are you alone?
No, I do not. I was going to ask you, is there a way that I can join a club someplace?
Yeah, you can contact me, and I can hook you in. The International Association for Near-Death Studies is where I found my peer group. I love my family, but in the years, we're a group unto ourselves, and I can help you find the International Association for Near-Death Studies. You can Google it, or you can reach out to me at peterpanagore.love, and I'll give you a hand, Gary. I will.
All right, that sounds great.
Jeremy, just go to Coast AM, and we've linked up to Peter's his website as well, peterpanagore.love, peterpanagore.love, and it's IANS, International Association for Near-Death Studies. Let's say hi to Thomas. I love to say this name in Wisconsin, Sheboygan. Hey, Thomas.
Hey, Richard. I wanted to comment on that again. I told you last time we talked that Thomas means twin.
I'm sorry? Say again, please.
I told you last time we talked on air that Thomas means twin. Do you remember that?
Thomas, something about a twin? I'm sorry. I'm having a little trouble hearing what you're saying.
I'll try. The word Thomas means twin. My last name means landlord.
Thomas means twin. Interesting.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. Okay.
My last name means landlord. It's just kind of a coincidence I thought I'd bring up.
Very interesting. All right.
I have a couple of near-death experiences, and then I actually had seen a vision of heaven a couple of months back. I'll try to give the experiences as anecdotally as I can. One of the first ones was I was swimming in a swimming pool in the backyard of my parents' house. I was like 10 years old, and I was swimming between the rungs of the ladders in the pool, and the bottom rung, between the rung and the ground, I got stuck. I could lift my hands up to touch the surface of the water, but I couldn't get out. I was shaking the ladder for about a minute. I'm like, okay, I'm going to die. I relaxed, and I slipped right out. It was really kind of horrible.
That is horrible.
Yeah, at 10 years old. I mean, I had experience downhill skiing. That was a crazy one, and twice with riding bicycles, on bikes in the wilderness. And one of the latest ones, this happened in 1985, actually Christmas morning in 85. I was in a massive car accident, and I don't have any recollection of the afterlife that had happened, but my head got split open. I broke every one of my ribs, were millimeters of my spine, my right side, and it was just ungodly. The effect it had on the people, on my family, was just something that I don't ever want anybody to go through. And a vision of heaven was like a globe, and the spinning underfoot, and not just the streets, but all the buildings and almost everything was made of gold. It was so glorious. I'll never forget it. It changed my life. And
How did it change your life, Thomas?
it made me realize and appreciate the pleasantness of life and how we can all go to a better place if we really have faith in like whatever system you want, Judaism, Christianity, Islam, and all the rest. There are also, something I bring up, there are a number of different heavenlies, not just the 7 heavens of Christianity. There's a promised land of Judaism, the paradise of Islamic faith. It's also called the abode of peace. There's a couple other names. I understand that nirvana is not merely a state of mind. It's actually Buddhist heaven. And that Buddhist paradise is called Svite Rama. And there's a bunch of others. Changal, the Taoist Pure Land. Xi'an is the Confucian heaven. And there's even more, like Asgard and Olympus and things you wouldn't really normally think of. And as I know this, there's a phrase in the Bible that says, "I have not seen, nor has ear heard, nor has thought comprehended, nor apprehended that which the good Lord God has in store for those of us who love and serve Him." So if anybody else says, keep your chin up. We're going home.
Okay, Thomas, thank you so much for sharing those experiences. Let's see if we can squeeze in one more call here. Let's see. Joe is in Monterey, California. Joe, welcome.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you. I wonder if he's familiar, Paul. I wonder if you're familiar with
Peter.
The word demiurge, Demiurge. This is what people consider metaphysically as the lesser god, and it's ruthless, actually, and not to be content with. I don't know if you understand that God is really, like John in the Bible says, God is love. And you said there is not quite unconditional love. But I
didn't say that.
The mere fact that he took...
Wait a minute, Joe. Let Peter correct you, because you said Joe said something, or you said Peter said something he didn't. Let Peter...
In my
Go ahead,
conversation with Richard, I said at that stage of my experience, it wasn't quite unconditional. But I didn't tell you my whole story. It is unconditional love that I can't comprehend. The breadth and the length of not our universe alone, but universe upon universe love that is woven into all things that are in a way that is so far beyond my comprehension, but reoriented my life right back to being the most beloved of all. And I saw that every human being is the most beloved of all, and that everything is made of love, and that love pervades everyone's heart, and few see it. No, I did say at that point it wasn't quite unconditional, and it wasn't. But after it infilled me, it showed me itself. And unconditional
All right.
love is all there is.
Joe, thank you for that. West of the Rockies, Aaron is in Fountain Valley, California. Aaron, welcome.
Oh, my God. Thank you so much, Richard Garrett. Thank God I got on with you.
Just got a couple minutes, so you'll have to get to your point really quickly. Thank you.
I'm so glad that you're such an adventure spirit that could revive, so to speak, the phoenix aspect of how we could possibly survive. I understand it's a particular situation, but I mean, the adventurous spirit that you undertake, that's all that we need. That's what we need. And so I'm so glad Richard's here to talk with you. And he might call. I just want to say that I'm glad, Peter, that I think that you could bring so much inspiration to those people who I don't know if you have a book or if you're writing.
Oh, he
books,
has a number of books. He speaks. He writes. He does all of that. You can go to peterpanagore.love and find out more. Peter, last question: Do you still I don't know, take risks? Do you still have that adventurous spirit? Do you mountain climb? Do you ski, or how do you
Oh yeah,
approach life now?
I'm a skier. I'm a double diamond tree skiing, mogul skiing fellow, and that right now I'm a bicyclist. I love speed and control. I still have an adventurous spirit. It makes me it makes me exhilarated while I live.
All right then. Wow. peterpanagore.love, and an amazing story. I can't thank you enough for joining me tonight. Thank you so much.
Oh, Richard, I can't thank you for having me on your show. The more people that hear about near-death experience, the more near-death experiencers will speak up. The more they speak up, the less we'll all be isolated, and the more this unconditional love will be expressed, told.
All right. Thank you so much. For George Norrie, George Napley Salayan, Stephanie Smith, Tom Danheiser, Dan Galanti, Adam Thompson, Donna Walker, Chris Burrows, Tim Banal, Sean